Hi all. Today I wanted to share with you a really fun method for creating dark and evolving drones, transition sound effects, whooshes, soft impacts and everything in between. Before we go any further though, I just want to let you know that I am selling my first sample pack, a collection of sounds I created using this exact method. So if you watch this video and you can't replicate the methodology involved, don't worry, you can purchase my sounds to play around with or to incorporate into your own project straight away. There is a link in the description below. But enough about that, let's take a look at the sound design technique in some more detail. As you will have guessed from the video title, we're going to be talking about feedback and the steps you can take to set up your very own feedback stereo instrument for sound design. The idea for this came to me after I spent about a week watching many other sound designers playing with feedback and recording their results to be edited and processed later on inside a DAW. Some of the videos being put out have really interesting results and were in fact my main inspiration for trying this out and developing my own version of feedback sound design. To understand this methodology, you will first need to understand what a feedback loop is. Audio feedback, also known as acoustic feedback or the Larsen effect, is a special kind of positive loop gain which occurs when a sound loop exists between an audio input, for example a microphone, and an audio output, for example a monitor. In this example, a signal received by the microphone is amplified and passed out of the loudspeaker. The sound from the loudspeaker can then be received by the microphone again, amplified further, and then passed out through the loudspeaker again. This creates continual feedback, hence the term feedback loop. So in my case, I have an old Tannoy Reveal 5A monitor to project the sound running out of my Scala 18i8 audio interface, and I'm using my Sennheiser ME66 shotgun microphone to feed sound into that. I decided very early on that I wanted to record everything inside of Logic at as high a sample rate as possible. Initially I set my recording at 192 kHz, but after some latency issues and a bit of help from my friend Marlon over at White Noise Studio, thank you Marlon, I decided to reduce this to 96 kHz. Here is a quick clip of my initial feedback recording with everything set up as described so far. As you can hear, there's some pretty cool feedback sounds. Nothing revolutionary on their own, but with some more accurate mic control and processing in post, I think you could come up with some pretty cool drones and whooshes. However, I personally decided pretty early on that I wanted to avoid doing any real work with this experiment, and that meant thinking up ways of altering this sound in real time. This is where things started to get interesting. Similar to how a lead guitarist can play through a series of effects pedals to help shape the tone of feedback, I decided to apply plug-in effects to my shotgun mic channel in order to shape and modulate the sound I was achieving. I immediately found the results to be very interesting. Essentially what is happening here is that the input signal, in other words the shotgun mic, is first recorded to disk. Logic then applies the desired plugins to the output signal, in this case the Tannoy monitor, and this is happening in real time. The microphone then picks up this new altered signal and thus every loop onwards is altered, because every loop onwards has the effects reapplied to it, and thus the output is different to the signal when it first came in to the audio interface. Another more clear way of thinking about it would be to say that the sound evolves over time. At this point, the potential for endless possibilities starts to become apparent, as my mind begins to recall all those late-night impulse purchases on Plugin Boutique. There was still one problem with this method though: it's mono. To overcome this, I had two options: either to apply stereo-generating plugins to the sounds I capture in post, or to include stereo-generating plugins in my current effects chain and somehow capture the loop in stereo in real time. The latter option was certainly the more challenging of the two, simply because my setup so far consisted of a single microphone and monitor. But having used plenty of stereo imaging plugins over the years to effectively fake the stereo effect in post, I did feel a duty to try an alternative method in the hope of achieving a better result, and honestly, I'm so glad that I did. My first attempt at solving this issue was to throw more gear at it. I first hooked up a second monitor to be able to output in stereo, and then employed a pair of Audio-Technica AT2020s to record that in stereo. Initially, it seemed like a good plan, but in practice it proved troublesome. Introducing the pair of condenser microphones meant that my room acoustics had to be taken into account, and even after putting up some acoustic panels, the mics would still pick up unwanted noises from the outside, as I was not in a soundproof studio when doing this. Another issue was that the additional microphones meant less freedom of movement for my ME66 shotgun microphone. This made the setup as an instrument much harder to play, and all of this led me to rethinking and implementing a far simpler solution. All this new solution required was two very short jack speaker cables, which I picked up online for around £15. The idea was to revert back to the original loop of one monitor and one microphone, and then to create an entirely separate loop for the recording. This is the setup that I would recommend you to try if you're able to, and as promised, here's how you set it up. First thing you're going to want to do is take your audio interface and unplug everything from it. Step 2 then is going to be to take your two jack speaker cables and plug them both into the main outputs on the back of your audio interface. Because the main out is going to be the sound that we're trying to capture here, you're going to run these two speaker cables back into the inputs of your audio interface. In this case, I'm plugging mine back into inputs 3 and 4. You can then go ahead and put your audio interface back where it was, as we're only going to be looking at the front ports from here on. Now we have the interface back where it needs to be, and in theory we have our recording loop set up with the main outputs going back into inputs 3 and 4. We're just looking now to incorporate the original feedback loop back into this setup. Here you can see I'm plugging my headphones back into the first headphone port on my audio interface. In the second headphone port, I'm going to run another jack speaker cable. This time it'll go straight to the tannoy monitor that we're going to use as part of our feedback loop. Finally then, you want to plug your microphone back in to the audio interface. In this case, I'm using channel 1, and that's my ME66 shotgun microphone. So in theory, we've got two loops here. The first loop is the recording loop, and that consists of the stereo out from the back of the interface back into ports 3 and 4 to capture all of the audio. And then we have our original feedback loop, slightly altered because we have the out coming through a headphone port, going to a monitor, and then we have our shotgun microphone being captured back into channel 1 again on the interface, completing the loop. A few things to take note of here. Firstly, your audio interface may not have two headphone ports. If that's the case, then you will have to do away with headphones and just run the speaker cable feeding your monitor through the headphone port you have available. Also, remember that the headphone level control is now your monitor loudspeaker level. So you can keep one hand on this when playing with the feedback loop to cut and increase the volume in order to help shape the sounds you are creating in real time. By the same token, the main monitor level control on your audio interface will now be controlling the level of the signal being recorded, so bear that in mind. I personally find it best to set and forget this level, much like you would set and forget the input gain knobs prior to recording. So with this new setup, we can play around with some sound design, safe in the knowledge that we are capturing everything in stereo. Without further ado, here are some of the results. As I mentioned at the start, I have a sample pack for sale featuring all the sounds you're hearing here and more. The link to that pack is in the description below. Everything in the pack is 96 kHz, so if you're not able to experiment with this setup yourself, you can at least take away some high quality recordings to play with further. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, then please consider subscribing to my channel. Also, if you have any questions or comments, then leave them below. I'd like the comments to help others who are considering this kind of experiment, so it would be really cool to see some suggestions for improvements from you all. And for those of you who do try this out, I guarantee you will have a blast. Until next time though, bye for now.